George Kilpatrick, New Inspiration for the Nation. We are the program that celebrates the positive achievements of African Americans of all walks of life. People we feel good about. We help our listeners achieve their dreams, and we're so glad that you could join us on this program for this special edition. We've got a very special guest in the house. Coach D is in the house. He's an educational consultant. He's a speaker. He's a trainer. And he is an author. And he is about motivating students all around the world to achieve their dreams. Not only that, he's about helping students, parents, teachers, you name it. He is about helping the education system in this country do what it's supposed to do, educate our kids. And so we're glad that we had a chance to catch up with Coach D in the studio and hear what he has to say. Coach D, good to see you.
George, as always, man, it's a pleasure to be here. And, you know, they always say that iron sharpens iron, man. It's always good to be in the room with someone that's on fire to help these young people in our country, man.
I'm really so glad that you had a chance to stop by and talk to us. And one of the things I'm really interested in is you and I in getting together for this conversation. You're laughing because we had an email little thing going on there. And what I mean by that is, so I challenged Coach D because I said, Coach D, you're passionate about helping these kids, but he was recently in studio in town to talk to the New York State Higher Educational Services Corporation. These are financial aid counselors for the most part, and helping them to really understand where their students sit and understand them. And so I said to Coach D, so what are you really going to do with them? You know, what's really new going on? What are the best practices? Well, why did I say the word best practices? So let me start right there. Because when I said best practices, he ended up sending me a 19-page response to say, best practices. That's all educators talk about is best practices. But they research to death and then they don't do anything about it. All right, Coach D, so let's work it out. Let's talk, because I'm interested in best practices, because I believe that best practices is what we need to imitate all across this country, but you have a whole different take on it.
Yeah.
So talk to me, brother. First of all, I know I just said a lot there. You laughing because you know you got into it,
It was
brother.
Cool. I dug into you, man. I dug into you. You dug into me, too. So
yes, I did.
Some mutual digging. But, you know, my thing is, there's a such thing, man, that's called analysis paralysis. We've heard that more than once. And, you know, when we're dealing with young people, we're dealing with human beings who want to connect like everybody else. And so my thing is, not that I'm anti-best practice, but when our entire focus is just simply research, development, research, but not really engage in the process of making the effective connections that are needed to be made, in particular when we're talking about students of color, then what we're doing is we're shortchanging ourselves. We're putting money and millions of dollars. You know, in this country, in like the last 5 years, we put somewhere around, I don't know, $8, $9, $10 billion into closing the achievement gap and doing these type of things. But what we find ourselves is in the same boat over and over again. But then you go into some schools and they seem to have made that connection. What's the difference? It's not that they're not looking at best practices. It's not that they're doing the research, but they have made the connection with this generation of youth one of their top priorities. And as a result, there's a trust factor that comes in, and the young people want to engage in conversation and engage in education and all of that. So it's not that I'm anti-best practice, because I read a lot of the studies, and I know a lot of the best practice schools and practitioners and educators. But what I am saying is that we have to understand that when all said and done, the thing that causes a young person to want to do well in school is a connection with a caring adult.
You said that we can share best practices all day long, but if an organization does not have the passion to create their own best practices, it'll be a waste of words and time.
What a profound statement, George, when you think about it, because, you know, the ones who have created the best practices didn't know they were creating best practices. They were engaged in the process of what can I do to help our young people. What can I do to create a climate within our school that young people feel that they can learn here, they can be honored here, they can be trusted here, they can be respected here. Most of these people did not set out to say, ooh, we are going to establish a best practice with this. It ended up a best practice because it started with that individual's heart. So that's why when I when I talk about these, these schools, and we talk about this best practices piece, I tell people you create best practices by being the best educator that you can be, being the best principal that you can be, being the best school counselor, school psychologist, media specialist, on and on and on, because all the stakeholders play a role in the school. Let me say this real quick. When I was in high school, there was a janitor, a maintenance guy. He used to walk by me all the time, and he would look at me and say, "Man, I see something in you. I see potential in you." This guy wasn't in the classroom. He just floated around the halls doing the thing. But you know what? His words meant something to me. So when we talk about now, can you call that a best practice?
Right.
Can you do research on that? No. This is an individual that took the time. You can't collect that data. But what it is, now here I am sitting there being interviewed by you. Here I am traveling all over the country doing these programs. Why? Because I had caring people like that man that was in that hallway that took the time.
You said that we're in a relationship war, and that we need to realize that all kids are in the category of being at risk. Sure. And you said that America has been unkind to our kids, and they have flooded their minds with garbage that they see as reality. They are making relationships with them through folly, violence, and other forms of foolishness. You're saying that this is what schools, parents, and organizations are doing?
No, I'm talking about America as a whole. I'm talking about Hollywood.
America as a whole.
I'm primarily, that's more of a Hollywood type of a thing, and the music kind of a thing. And what I am saying to the parents, I'm a parent, George.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying to the parents is, what are you allowing your children to be exposed to? We talked at this presentation about identity. If you have an identity in your family, and you have an identity within your name of who your family name and what it represents, if you have an identity in that core infrastructure called home, you don't need to find it out here. So in the name of profits, people are doing whatever, man. They're selling our kids anything. They don't care. It's about dollars, man. Be it music, be it shoes, you name it. It's a constant flow. Very, very seldom do you ever see it connected in any way to values. Matter of fact, most of it's connected to, this obtrusive, disrespectful behavior. Why respect your mom? Why respect your dad? Just have fun. Listen, what I'm trying to say is this. America has been unkind. There was a time where they tried to limit some of that stuff, but now it seems like the floodgate is open. So what I'm saying more than ever, the people who care about our kids have to be vigilant, man. They have to be determined. They have to be committed to, connect with our kids, not in the manner that they do, but have that same level of passion.
I don't want it to be lost on something you said earlier, that the most important thing for a kid is for their relationship. The most important thing in their life is a caring adult,
yes, sir.
No matter where that adult is. And what you said to me today during the presentation that you gave at the conference that I picked up on was that no matter what's going on in the home, no matter what's going on in the classroom, if there is one caring adult in the life of a child,
yes,
or a young adult or anyone, that can make all the difference.
All the difference in the world. You see, all the difference. And I shared our core philosophies. One of those core philosophies was kids are not committed to programs. Kids are committed to people. You see. And that one person can cause that young person who's sitting right on the verge, am I going to get involved with a gang? Am I going to go out and get pregnant? That individual relationship can cause that young person to say, I don't want to disappoint that person.
See, what I like about that is you said that it doesn't matter who the kid is or who you are.
Yeah.
Stop randomly in the hall and say to somebody, I see promise in you.
Oh, could you imagine that if we had school districts all over the country where you had multiple educators and caretakers saying that to kids every single day? Could you imagine what that would do? Now, the first time the kid would hear it, they'd be in shock. They wouldn't believe it. They think it's just, But if they kept hearing it over and over again, then they start to realize this person is sincere about this. Now, all of a sudden, there's a connection that's made. And that young person no longer sees that person as just an educator or just a school counselor. That person becomes a confidant. This becomes someone that they trust and can believe in. Our kids don't get much of that nowadays.
We're talking to Darrell Andrews. He's an educational consultant. He's an author. He has a couple of books out that you ought to know about. One of them is called Believing the Hype, 7 Keys to Motivating Students of Color, with a forward by Dr. Jawanza
Kunjufu, my
Kunjufu.
man.
Give it up for Dr. Kunjufu.
Yeah.
Also, the Purpose Living Teen, a teen's guide to living your dreams. And he calls himself America's passion coach, and he is very passionate about these issues. And Coach D, as you go, he calls himself Coach D, of course, as you go all across this country, and one of the things I asked you in our email little battle,
I love it, man.
I said, okay, look, what are some of the best practices around the country that you have seen where young people are meeting the standards, are fully engaged, and that they are meeting their possibilities? Because in district, especially in public education all across this country, we're seeing students drop out at 9th grade. We're seeing a 50% dropout rate in cities all across this country. We're seeing school districts being overtaken by the state because they can't pay their bills, for example, and they're not giving the quality education that they're supposed to give. We see parents that are disengaged from. You see that some places where the parents are disengaged, you step over the line and you have overflow. We call it watching paint dry, because you say the students are painting the wall, all the parents will show up. You've got that disparity going on. So what have you seen that debunks all of that and gives us the idea that if you make it your goal to be best at what you do in your building, no matter what the environment says, you can make a difference?
Let me tell you something. I have hundreds of stories I can share, but let me share one that just continues to touch my heart to this day. Years ago, I was invited to speak and be a part of a school district, some training for a school district called the Gadsden County School District in Florida. During the time when I was invited, this school, they were like last in the nation as far as their what they call the FCAT scores, the Florida Comprehensive Achievement Test. They were last as far as the number of schools that were hitting their AYP goals. And they brought in a new superintendent who was actually a superintendent who was from the local area. So he was familiar with the kids, he was familiar with the community. And I give a shout out to him. His name is Reginald James. And Reginald James came in with a new school-wide philosophy entitled No Excuses. Now, as you know, any good leader understands you can have a vision, you can have a visionary perspective, but you got to get people to buy in. So what he did was and I don't think I've ever seen a superintendent ever do anything of this nature. He went out and interviewed everybody he could. He interviewed 100 kids, one at a time, to find out what works, what doesn't work. He pulled in parents and he interviewed them and asked them, how can we work together collaboratively in this school district? What can we do to make it this school district our school district? He pulled in George, for some schools, this is a big one, but it's hard for them. He pulled in churches. He sat down with some of the people in the church community and said, listen, we need mentors. We need this and that. We need to get, and so what he did, from this core group of people, he formed these committees. And all of them played a role. He interviewed innovative teachers, and he had these core groups of council individuals involved with council who provided insight into the function of the district. He decentralized the district and said, we need to be out and in the schools engaging with these kids. We don't need to be sitting up here in this tower. We need to be out there.
Kind of like what Michelle Reed was saying when she was in D.C. Let's break down that system and decentralize it and put it out in the... it didn't work there.
Yeah, right.
They're like, oh no, we're going to keep...
No, we don't... Goodbye, Superwoman. You're out of here. No. So the thing is, no. So, but there it did.
Yeah.
And so in the schools you walked around, there was just this environment, this school climate, which you hear a lot about education now, of no excuses. It was a mindset. It was an accepted paradigm. To make a long story short, they had a thing, people talk about studying for tests, they had a thing called stop, drop, and study, where the students would have to stop, drop, and study at 7 o'clock for these tests. It was just an amazing environment, and parents bought into it. Why? Because there was the synergy there was a collaboration. And to make a long story short, not just because of the philosophy, but because of the follow-up activities of the parents and of the community and of the churches and of all the different community leaders, within a period of a year, this school district turned it around to where they were they had the second highest increase in their FCAT scores.
By the way, George Kilpatrick, New Inspiration for the Nation. We're here with Coach D, Darrell Andrews. More about him on his website, CoachDSpeaks.com. And as I hear you, and as I hear people listening, and as we know, you kind of reference Superwoman, Michelle Reed, as featured in Waiting for Superman. If you haven't seen it, you need to see it and get discussion groups going about what is really happening with public education in this country and how we in the films, in the eyes of the filmmakers, have failed our children through public education, and for a number of reasons. So, but people listening to this, they have a couple of issues. Number one, wherever they're listening to this, their standards say that they have to do it this way. Teachers will say, "Coach D, I love what you're saying, but we've got to teach to the test." Counselors are saying to you, "Oh, that may be well and fine, but we've got these set of standards that we have to adhere to." Now, you hear that all the time.
All day long.
You go all over the country
All day long.
and you hear about that.
All day long.
What breaks that down and moves education forward?
Let me tell you a story, and it's going to be short. And this is going to be one of those eye-openers for people. I was at the National Alliance of Black School Educators had a conference several years ago. Bernice King was the keynote speaker. And she shared something that...
The daughter
of Martin Luther
King Jr. Okay.
You got it. And she shared something that I think that educators and administrators and school board members and community leaders need to hear all over this country. So I'm not going to give you my answer, I'm going to give you hers. She asked a question. She posed a question to the audience. She said, "Why is my father named on a street sign in just about every city in this country? Why did my father win the Nobel Peace Prize? Why is my father known in China, Russia? You know, they even honor his life. Why?" And everybody sat there and they paused and they looked. They had no idea where she was going with this. And this is what she said, George. And school districts, if you're listening, you need to hear this. Teachers, if you're listening, you need to hear this. And this is not going to be a popular statement. She said, "My father did not become the man that he was, or he was, because he went with the grain. My father became it because he went against it. My father didn't adhere to what everybody told him he needed to adhere to. He broke through some of that adherence. He said, I can't transform things by doing everything that everybody is saying, this is what I need to do." His heart and his mission was to change and transform and to affect his race. And she said, "Now, let me ask you a question. All of you school educators, what are you conforming to? What are you conforming to? Have you given up the fight to want to do what's right for the kids?" She said, because if we all just do what the masses do, we're going to get the same kind of results that the masses.
You're asking, and what I hear you saying then, Coach D, is you're asking teachers a similar question that Steve Perry has asked.
Yeah.
If you don't like this job, get out of it.
Yeah.
Because we need teachers who are going to be committed.
Yeah.
Now, let me tell you what teachers are saying.
Yeah.
But I'm in school districts where I can't get a new textbook.
Right.
I can't get a copy made. I can't get a piece of tape when I need it.
Yeah.
How does a teacher motivate and go against the grain in an environment in a school district where they can't even get a piece of tape?
Yeah. Listen, we're not saying that in some school districts there are not problems and there's not challenges. What I'm trying to say is this, that when you have a situation as desperate and challenging as the one we're facing today in this country, you can't, even in the most dire situations like this school district I just described to you, which was in a very similar situation, you have got to have people who are willing to make, and you heard me use this word a perceptual shift, a modification of thoughts.
Sure.
In some cases, you're never going to have perfection. But the trailblazers and the trend makers of any generation are never the ones who just get caught in that midst of despair and say there's no hope. They get creative, man.
But just like, Coach, I got to get in here because so many inner city schools are in broken systems, which in Waiting for Superman talked about this, in dropout factories all across this country.
Absolutely.
And here you come with your message of hope and your passion, and they can be fired up in that moment, but they know that when they go back to that school with the walls falling down where they can't get a piece of tape, and they got textbooks from 5, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, or whatever, I don't even know what the standard is. But my point is, how do you break through that, especially for our inner city schools?
Yeah, not by yourself. First of all, not by yourself. All right? If you see yourself as an individual trying to do this, you'll fight an uphill battle that you'll never win. But what you have to do is you have to take your synergy. You got to engage those parents. You got to engage those school counselors. You got to come together in a collective manner and say, you know what? when it's all said and done, no matter how you look at it, we are here for a primary reason. That's to impact the lives of these young people. Because it's so easy to get caught up in all the mess that's around us and forget the most important aspect of why we are in this school building. That's where our schools are having the greatest challenge. I feel compassion from here to California for those teachers. I know how hard it is. I know how hard it is when you can't get basic things done in your classroom, or you need pencils, or you need pen. But if we can listen, back before, the whole thing, Brown versus the board and all those things back then, folks had limited.
We figured out a way to get our kids.
We figured out a way.
Yeah, we did.
Why now we lost that? Why all of a sudden now is I don't have this and I can't do that, and what happened? What happened is we've conformed. That's what Bernice was talking about. We've got into this mode of thinking that is hopeless, and we're buying into what they're saying in the headlines. We have forgotten that before all of this, man, folks were doing all kinds of stuff. I grew up in the world, man. We were, man. If we didn't have sugar, we went next door and they gave us some sugar. George, come on, man, let's be real about this. If you didn't have any meat, you went next door, they gave you some meat till next week, and then you paid them back. We learned how to work together.
You say that it's all about how we relate to one another. And through your HYPE program that you founded some years ago, and when it was up and running, helping you pursue excellence, and you had the core principles. And I love the one about identity. I mean, it's relationships. It's called the core principles: relationships, identity, and dreams. Right? You connect the student to a dream, and you connect the student to their future. Relationships is. Go ahead, give me the relationship.
Yeah, relationship. And I said with the relationship component, we said in R, it's the RID factor.
Right.
The R, one thing is relations, and we tell the students, if you show me your friends, I'll show you your future.
Yes.
And again, that's part of the challenge right there, because what we're saying is toward the young people is, you want to go to college. If you want to go have a bright future, you got to find, you don't need a whole host of them, but you need 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 ones that's going to encourage you down that pathway. We have the I, the identity. And one thing we shared about the identity is this, it's not what other people think of you, is what you think of yourself. If that's a self-esteem issue. And I said, if we have young people who perceive themselves in the proper way, guess what? Then all of a sudden that identity shapes who they are. And I mentioned, at the conference that's a parent's piece right there.
Parents as coach.
Yeah,
as
parents as coach. Yeah, parents got to shape those identities. Listen, I'm the man I am today because of my mother, a single mom in the public welfare system. She didn't look at
living in the projects.
She didn't look at that as that's. We were in it, we were in the situation, but that wasn't. She didn't look at that as our identity. She planted a seed of hope in her 2 boys, even though my father wasn't a part of our life, and he decided to take off at an early when I was a young baby. But she created such a sense of identity in us that I never ended up, going to doing drugs. I never ended up in jail. I never ended up doing those type of things because my identity was. I didn't have to go outside the home to find it. I didn't have to go.
So many kids don't know that. Yeah. They don't know who they are. They don't have anybody affirming, or what they do. And I've said this before. Or who affirms them shapes their identity. Show me your friends, show me your future. And so they end up going left instead of going right.
You know what? I can't say it any better. And see that, so that parent, here's the key, or that caretaker, or that teacher that cares about the kid, or that counselor, or that coach, or that pastor, or that if we now step up and say, I'm going to take the time to affirm this young person's identity. That young person does not have to go to the gang leader to be getting that sense of identity because they have one already. They don't have to. A young man doesn't have to find his identity in a relationship with a young lady. You see what I'm saying? These kids, they're making these choices because there's a identity complex. There's a self-esteem issue. I don't know who I am, and so guess what? I'm gonna go have somebody tell me who I am. But when a child knows, a young person knows who they are, George, they don't have to look out there to try to find it.
We're talking with Coach D. Coach D. Darell Andrews. He's an he's fired up. He's an educational consultant. He's an author. He's a speaker. He's a trainer. CoachDSpeaks.com on the web. Here's his 2 books. One is called The Purpose Living Teen, a teen's guide to living your dreams. And the other book is called 7 Keys to Motivating Students of Color. Believing the Hype, 7 Keys to Motivating Students of Color. And these books are obviously available on his website, on Amazon, and all the other places where you get books. One of the things I love that you said, though, today, one of the among the other many things that you said that I want to really follow up on is I want to get your take on this whole Penn State thing.
Yes.
Because you kind of referenced that.
Yes.
And we're in that moment right
Yeah.
now. We can't avoid that because somehow something went awry there.
Yes, sir.
So how, given that, and
Yes.
the rumor is that these are students of color that
Yes.
who may have been affected by
Yes.
this.
Yes. Yes.
Okay? We don't know. It's still being discussed even as we have this conversation.
Yes.
So what about that and the work that you do that we need to understand?
Well, that screams loudly to a problem that, again, as a nation, we really need to think about. You don't hear this because this is not the stuff that's going to, get, the ratings and all that kind of stuff. But the question we got to ask ourselves is, why did these boys not say anything? Why were they so quiet in the midst of all of this? Now, you and I know there's a lot of factors there. It could have been the fact there was the all this person.
I know where this is going.
Yeah.
I know where this is going.
The all this person
Yeah,
and all
yeah.
of that. But I'm gonna tell you something. There's a lot of other factors. But I'll say this: where were the caring people in those boys' life? Okay, at risk, whatever. Why did they not feel like they can go to somebody and say something to them? Why didn't they feel like they can go to a teacher? Why didn't they feel like they can go to a community leader? Why? And so, but also, another thing that screams loudly about this is that was Penn State. If it happened in that situation, there's kids all over this country, man, that could be in tough situations. Not maybe that rough, but they're not saying anything. They're quiet. Why do our kids feel like they don't have enough caring people in their lives that they can say something to them? That's a problem in our country right now.
So in order for that to happen, in
Yeah.
order for us to create the environment where
Yeah.
we have to show through our actions
Yes.
that we actually do care.
There you go, my man. And then you know what? Guess what happens? Now that kid, when something like that, they can make a beeline to somebody to rescue them. You see? And another thing, I want to say this in regards to our young boys, okay? A lot of people don't know this as well, and it's something to think about. Young boys are young men. They're boys, but they're little men. And so when this happens to a young boy, there's a pride issue. I don't want anybody to know this happened to me. Maybe it's gonna affect my manhood. You know what I mean? It's going to affect who I am, how other people are going to perceive me. And here's another thing. And again, these are the things, they're not talking about this, but we are, George, because people need to talk about this because they don't, it's this. A lot of the young guys feel very protective of their mothers. And so they don't want their moms to be dragged into this thing. So I'm going to take this, whatever, the pain of all of this, because I'm being protective of my mother, and plus I'm a man. I don't want anybody to know that I'm going through this. What it says, once again, we need males to step up. We need fathers out there. These young boys got to have somebody, listen to me, George, that's their Superman. Because you know what? When they have that Superman in their life, which they thought this dude was supposed to be, then guess what? You try to do something like that to me, I got somebody to go to.
So
Protecting them.
So we want to raise our expectations.
Yeah.
We want to raise our expectations of ourselves
Yes.
as men. We
Yes.
want to rededicate ourselves as men.
Yes.
And then as educators
Yes.
who are responsible for
Yes.
raising, I don't want to say raising children, but raising
Yes.
the bar educationally
Yes.
for children.
Yes.
Let me say this.
Yes, sir.
One of the things that you said to me, and I want you to recant this for our audience before we go, is in your talk today, I asked you, I looked around the room and I said, so what do you think your impact was?
Yeah.
And you said,
I said that for many of the people who sat in that room today, the greatest impact was they became deeply introspective. They said, you know what? I got to go back and I got to readjust.
Yeah.
I got to rethink the way I'm thinking. I got to rethink the way I think about these kids that are in my school. I got to go back
and my biases.
And my biases.
And my perceptions.
And my perceptions and maybe even my prejudices.
Yeah.
Because you can't impact the life of a young person if you're carrying that baggage into the school every day. You can fake it, you can try, but ultimately it's going to come out. And our young people today, George, deserve better. When they walk into that building, they need someone that's going to give them 100% of their effort, someone that's going to look at them out of the eyes of equality. I'm not looking at you because of the way you look or the way you're dressed or your socioeconomic situation. I'm looking at you as a young person with potential. And when we start getting school systems like that throughout this country, despite all of the challenges, we're going to always have financial challenges. You're never going to have enough money. There's going to always be some problem. When we get people that they can recenter themselves around that, guess what? America, instead of dropping down the ranks internationally, academically, maybe we'll start climbing back up.
Coach D Speaks, George Kilpatrick, New Inspiration for the Nation. CoachDSpeaks.com on the web. He has 2 books out you ought to know about: Believing the Hype, 7 Keys to Motivating Students of Color, and The Purpose Living Teen, A Teen's Guide to Living Your Dreams. 2 books that I highly recommend. And Coach D, you want to say?
George, before I go, I just want to say to you personally, we've known each other for a long time, and thank you for your commitment to this generation. You've been a pillar. You've been a voice. You know, you're no holds bar. That's why we debating back, having this little scrap between emails. But don't ever stop doing that, because that's what it takes, man, to change. That's what it's all about.
You know, I received that blessing, and I appreciate that. And you keep doing the work that you're doing
Yes.
because you are making a difference, one person at a time.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things we ought to, one of the lessons we need to leave
Yes.
with people
Yes.
is that you can only reach one at a time.
That's right.
Don't be discouraged. If you got to give a program and there's one student sitting there,
Go for it.
give the best
Go for it.
presentation you have. Engage that one student. You told me when you first started,
sometimes we'd have 2 kids in there.
2 kids in there.
And I spoke to them like they're the 2 most important kids on the planet.
And their lives have been changed. And you have been changing a lot of lives, speaking all over the country. Educator, education consultant, speaker. He's a trainer, and he's an author. He actually trains speakers, too. So if you want to do that as well, you can go to his website, CoachDSpeaks.com, and find out what he's doing all across this country to make a difference. I'm George Kilpatrick. This is New Inspiration for the Nation.
Thank you.